Hello and welcome everyone to Topic and You. For those who don't know me, my name is Chris Gabrielson. I'm one of our technical leaders in the enterprise switching space within Cisco TAC. And this particular training is designed for all levels of Cisco engineers. Everyone from our brand new hires who are viewing this for the very first time, all the way to our experienced engineers who've maybe been on the queue for many years and know what I'm talking about when I say topic. So, knowing that our audience does include some new hires, I want to quickly run down what exactly is Topic, right? What do I mean when I say Topic? Topic is a Google-like search engine for finding information within Cisco. And as an engineer, it's going to be your most commonly used tool, easily the number one when it comes to finding related cases, bugs, trainings, documents, whatever it is that you need to solve your customer's issue. And you can go to Topic one of two ways. You could simply just type in Topic to your browser or just go to topic.cisco.com and you'll get something like this window up here. Now, one of the ways why I like to explain why being good at essentially Google searching, why is this such an important skill? Well, in order to explain that, I want to talk a bit about what we in TAC do every single year. So on average, across all of our technologies on every single theater around the world, TAC handles about 2 million SRs every single year. Now, of that 2 million, on average, around 15% are RMAs, or hardware failures. And this covers everything from the super simple stuff where the box or the switch doesn't boot out of the box, all the way to the more complex things where maybe it takes many weeks or many months in order to figure out hardware failure has occurred. Another common thing that we do in TAC is to identify bugs. And on any given year, we will see on average over 50,000 bugs that get collectively encountered over 150,000 times. And then obviously working the service requests and investigating bugs and everything else, there are millions of emails, thousands of trainings just like this one, and other technical documents which all get created every single year. And so when we look at these statistics, we need to ask ourselves, what do you think the chances are that someone has seen the exact same issue that you might be working now? Or, the other side to this coin, what are the chances that we haven't? On the previous slide, I mentioned there's over 50,000 defects seen every year, but in reality, around 30 to 35,000 are only seen once. So that's more than half of all the defects we see every year are only seen a single time out of the entire 2 million case portfolio. And so that's where topic searching becomes extremely important, because you need to have the knowledge to tell your customer either, yes, I can confirm that this is the issue you're encountering and here's our next steps, or you say with confidence, there is no recorded history of this issue, and therefore we need to take a different path. Right? So having that knowledge, being able to say that sort of thing with confidence ultimately comes down from having good topic search skills. And to build those skills, we're going to go through this particular agenda. We've got actually, this video is split up into two parts because found it's a little hard to sit still for more than an hour at a time. So in the first part, we're going to cover these two sections, how our data is structured and examples and searchable fields. And I like to say that this is really trying to get into a search mindset where you need to know what exactly is it that I want to see or don't want to see. And once you understand how you want to approach your search, then we can get into the actual tokens and key values that you could put into the topic search engine. And so if you're one of our experienced engineers who's listening to this recording, I encourage you to do both of these, but at the very least, we definitely want to pay attention to the examples and searchable fields, because that's going to be the actual terms that we could plug into the search engine to get those very relevant results. So that being said, we've got a lot to cover, so let's dive right into our data structures. And for this training, we're going to be focusing on 5 of what's considered sort of the most relevant search databases, right? So there's going to be service requests, cadets or CDETs. It's pronounced either way. That's code names for bugs. We also have TechZone, which is where we host a lot of our articles, as well as news groups, which are dedicated emails, and then all sources. And when we talk about all sources, this tends to be what we think about in traditional Google searching. So if we think about any given source, it's going to have these three things in common. It's going to have a date at which it was first created or first discovered by the search engine. It also has a title, so any email or article or case usually has a subject or a title or something up at the top. And then in the body of the document or whatever it is, we have the general text. And if you do a Google search, that's kind of what we're used to. We just want whatever our term is, we want it to appear somewhere in the title or text, and we also want it to be a relevant result. But there's actually a lot more to it than that, especially when we talk about some of these other data sources. If I were to expand on our service requests, for instance, we have things like tech and subtech. In the earlier slide, I talked about how TAC sees over 2 million SRs every single year. But as an engineer, you're not pulling from a queue that's 2 million cases deep. Instead, you're going to be specialized for a given product or technology. And so it makes sense to have a subset of those 2 million cases, whatever matches your specialty, gets routed to you and your team members. The way we accomplish that routing is through our technology and sub-technology. We can correlate that into our topic searches with a simple example. For instance, if you are a firewall engineer, you specialize in firewalls, you probably would not want to look at other service requests that were worked for wireless, or are worked in a data center switch, or are worked in something else that is not otherwise related to firewalls. So this becomes something that not only is used in case routing, but can be a searchable field as well. Now, when cases are opened or when they're closed, we typically populate the problem and or the resolution codes. This could be a case maybe gets opened up as hardware failure, and then after a TAC engineer looks at it, they determine the resolution was actually to upgrade software because it was a bug. This becomes a searchable field. When it comes to bugs, they don't make up the majority of our cases, but they do take up a lot of time to try to figure out. Whenever we do make a positive identification that a customer is definitely hitting a known defect, we're supposed to link that defect to the case. This helps to not only indicate how severe or how prolific that bug is, but also makes it where if someone comes across that case in their own search, they can see that, oh, there's a bug linked. Let me see if it's related to my customer's issue. Well, again, that's something we can integrate into our searches, as is something like case state. And there's a lot more than just open and closed. There's a whole bunch of stuff in the middle, but that is not only indexed, but searchable. So if we were to see, all right, how does this work in practice? I've got a simple example here, right? So if I type in 3850 high CPU fed, we get something where the first half of this is similar to what we expect, and this is what we're used to looking at. As long as these terms, right, 3850, high, CPU, and fed, as long as all those words appear somewhere in the kind of body of the document, we consider it a match. But what I want you to pay attention to is the other half of this result. You'll notice there's a lot of information here, and that is not by accident. All of these fields are indexed and are searchable, and if you know how to search them, they can be extremely useful for filtering out irrelevant information. Let's talk about this mindset. I'm not going to read all these aloud. Instead, pause, read them yourself, but I at least want to go through one with you, and let's look at the top left example. This is something that I ran into all the time back many years ago when I was an engineer. I might have a unique error message seen on my device, and I think that this customer is hitting a bug. So I want to search other SRs that have also seen this same error, but already have a bug attached. Remember, only about 7 to 8% of all of our SRs have a bug linked. And so if you think you're hitting a bug, why would you want to look at 90+% of the SRs that don't already have a bug figured out? That means they're either irrelevant or that engineer couldn't figure out what the problem is. So why bother including it in your results? Instead, I could tell Topic only show me the SRs that have a bug attached already, and I'll look in those to see if maybe they are related to my customer's issue. So these are all examples of the mindsets that I want you to start developing when it comes to kind of knowing how our data is structured and how we can translate that into a search. So going back, if I were to go back to our data structure here, we talked about service requests and all sources. Let's also talk about our software defects. These have a very similar structure. So just like we had our SRs get routed to tech and subtech, bugs are worked by engineers, development engineers, who specialize in a product or feature or piece of hardware. And as a result, if we want to see bugs that are similar, we're typically going to route those based on the project as well as the component or product fields. And that's the first and third options here. So whenever we have a bug that is, say, a firewall bug, it's going to be worked with other firewall bugs by a group of developers who specialize in firewall issues. Same if it's a data center switch, wireless issue, campus switch, etc. Bugs, just like our SRs, also have a state of some kind, or in this case, a status. And it's a lot more than just open and closed. There's more than a dozen different states that a bug can be in. And depending on what it is we're looking for, we may be able to include or exclude some of those results. And then finally, if a bug is determined to be legitimate, that means it should also be fixed in some version of code. And if I'm looking for a bug fixed or not fixed in a specific release, I can control that by filtering based on the integrated releases, which the integrated release represents the first version of code where that bug is considered resolved. If I were to look at a sample from Topic in terms of what this looks like, here I'm looking for a 5508 wireless controller issue where clients can't get DHCP. And again, the first half, that's what we're used to looking at, but what I want you to pay attention to is all this stuff down below. Things like the component, the status, the product, where it was found, what's the project, if there's any SRs attached. All these things are searchable, they're indexable, and you could use them to filter out your results. Let's talk about mindset, specific for defects. And this is something that happened to me all the time. Again, I'm not going to read all these aloud. I just want to focus on one or two. If we look at the top left example, this is something that happened to me all the time as an engineer. I would be researching some problem and I would find a bug that looked like it was a perfect match for my customer's issue. It had the same error, the same outputs, the same symptoms. Everything seemed like the problem, except for the fact that this bug should have already been fixed in their version of code. Well, if we go back to the previous slide, if I had a DHCP problem on a 5508 wireless controller, and that bug was fixed, and then a new bug came out that was also a DHCP problem on a 5508 wireless controller, there's a very good chance that the same group of development engineers are going to work on that new issue. Knowing that, I could tell Topic, let's search this same component, which is the way we route it to those engineers. Let's look at that same component to see if there's any other bugs worked by this group, and maybe one of those would explain what my customer is seeing. Something else that happens quite often, and this is the example in gold. Sometimes a customer might be running some very old software and they refuse to upgrade unless you give them a very explicit bug ID. They're not willing to just upgrade and hope it fixes the problem. But if their software is more than some period of time, 5, 6, 7 years old, it can be very difficult to get your results focused specifically around when that code was released. This means I could tell Topic, well, just show me search results that are between, say, 5 and 7 years old if my customer's code is 6 years old, and that should give me a window of about 1 year prior to and after their code was released, and hopefully there's some relevant info there. So again, this all comes back to thinking about how do I want to approach my searches? What exactly do I want to see? What do I want to include, exclude, etc.? And this is made a lot easier if we understand some of these data structures. The last two we need to talk about are TechZone and Newsgroups. Within TechZone, this is typically divided into two main areas. There's the TechZone knowledge base, which is where we host a lot of our articles. These are technical articles written for engineers by other engineers. So they're often very deep. They have a lot of information there. Occasionally, some of them will be made external, but for the most part, it's made for internal consumption. And then we also have a forum board, which again is also internal. It's made for engineers to post questions, get some responses in a kind of trivial manner where maybe I get an answer, maybe I don't. It's not super time sensitive. It's just kind of asking the larger group. We have the ability to filter based on each one of those. And when it comes to writing articles or in certain questions, the quality is not always the same. Sometimes an article might be brand new, it's still under construction, so it's not very helpful. Others, however, may have been in development for many years or took many weeks or many months in order to create in the first place, and as a result, they're considered very valuable, and a lot of people want to give them a thumbs up. The thumbs up in this case is measured as a kudo, and that is something we can filter on. I could tell Topic only show me the articles that have a certain number of kudos or a certain number of views, which generally speaking might be considered indications of good quality. Similar to this, we also have linked SRs. If an article helps you resolve a case, it's customary to link that to the article, link your SR to the article. That way we could sort of measure its impact and see that, yes, this is definitely beneficial for TAC. In addition to the TechZone, we then have our news groups, and these are pretty simple. This is just an email-based best effort system where we try to get some authoritative answer to a question we have. Because it's email, our filters are sort of limited. It's either going to be from, who the email is from, or the newsgroup name, which is where the email is going to. Other than that, not a whole lot of filtering options, but it is important to note that this does get indexed. It also means if I look at my mindset, again, we talked about the one in blue here. A lot of times if I'm doing something like a TechZone search, I'll usually search for articles with at least a certain number of kudos. It doesn't always have to be 10, but just some number, which to me indicates it's likely a higher quality article. And I want to check those out first. And only if I come up empty-handed do I maybe want to look at something that doesn't have any kudos. All right, so we talked about a whole lot there. Hopefully, the mindset approach that I'm referring to here is starting to make a little bit more sense. Now we need to put this into practice. And if you're falling asleep for the first half of the window, that's fine. Just make sure you start paying attention now, because this is going to be the terms that you actually put into the engine in order to get these very specific results I keep referring to. Now, when it comes to talking about these results, we first need to talk about tokens. And I have a very simple example here. If you were to search ASR 1000 committed memory error, what does Topic do? Well, the first thing it's going to do is it's going to break this up by the white space in order to treat each one of these words as an individual token and then perform a logical AND. This means that any indexed item with at least one of each of these tokens anywhere in that result will be considered a match. So any item that has ASR 1000 and the word committed and the word memory and the word error, only if all of those conditions are true will it be returned. Now, sometimes the order of these words matter, and that's where the second most popular thing is to add quotes to something. So if ASR 1000 space error is important in that order, then we put quotes around it, and now the quoted expression becomes a single token. The one little gotcha here that I would just caution you on is when you do this without any additional parameters, Topic will still do a little bit of substitution. So if there's 2 or 3 spaces between your quoted words, it doesn't really pay attention to the number of spaces. It's more just the order and location of these words that it's paying attention to when we have a quoted token. Now, in addition to all this, we also have a key value statement, and this is going to be what takes up the vast majority of the remainder of this section. If I want to start searching for something in a specific area, we need to use a key value. And the simplest example is for a general search, something like title. If I want the term ASR 1000 to be in the title of a document, service request, bug, etc., if I want it to be in the title specifically, I need to use the term title, colon, and then the token I want to use. Now, whenever we're dealing with these key value pairs, there are some gotchas that we need to be aware of. First off, note, there are no spaces on either side of this colon. It's title, colon, ASR 1000. That's it. If for some reason your token requires spaces, then just put it around quotes. But again, make sure you don't have any spaces on either side of that colon. And I have an example here where my mouse is, title, colon, quote, ASR space 1000. It'll now treat this as a single token, and so anything with ASR space 1000 in the title in that order will be returned. In addition to this, it's also important to note if you want to do a partial match, we're not going to support that by default. So if I were to look at this example here, searching title colon ASR will not match something with ASR 1000 in the title. Only if there's a space between them will it match, and it'll match the first word here, ASR. But it's not going to have a partial match where ASR, and this says ASR 1000, that will not show up in your results. If you need it to show up in your results, though, that's where our modifiers come in. And you might be asking yourself, well, what exactly is a modifier? In this training, we're going to be talking about 4 modifiers. These are going to be the most common ones that you're probably going to see. First is a question mark. This is a single character wildcard, and we support up to 3 question marks in the entire search string. So all the stuff you want to use, you can only have a maximum of 3. Where this is typically going to be used is maybe if you're looking for something that is related to a chassis number, right? I just want an ASR 1002, 1003, 1004. If you don't care about that last number, you could say ASR 1000 question mark. And that means doesn't matter what the last number is, just wildcard it, it'll match everything. If you need a multi-character wildcard, that's the star or asterisk, and this means 0 or more. It's also important to highlight this is only supported as a trailing wildcard, not a leading wildcard. And I have an example of this here. If I were to say cat9 star, that is considered a trailing wildcard. This says it'll match anything with cat9, including just cat9 as a whole with nothing else after it, but also has all the variations. So it'll match cat9k, cat9000, cat9410, right? All that stuff gets matched, provided it starts with cat9. But if you were to do star 9000, trying to find any word, term, token, etc. that ends with 9000, you may get some results through topic, but keep in mind that this is not officially supported. This is considered a leading wildcard, where we say, hey, just find, anything. I don't care what's in the beginning, but I want it to end with this. That's a no-go. The last 2 tokens here, or the last 2 modifiers, greater than or less than, fairly straightforward, right? Anything there's greater than or equal to, you can use either one of these terms. And these are great examples for date ranges. This is something I use this modifier for all the time. And we'll see some other examples where you could use greater than or less than. But this is another general search technique where if you want to find something that was indexed or created at or after a certain date, this is how you would do it. The important gotcha here is you must follow this format, the 4-digit year followed by a dash, 2-digit month, dash, and then 2-digit day. It also means if you were to do something that is a single digit, like January or 1st, you need to have the 0 there. So all these characters must be present. You cannot abbreviate it. And this example here, date greater than 2020-01-01, this will give you all results in topic on or after January 1st. And technically, it'll be January 2nd because this is not a greater than or equal to, but just be aware That's how this function works. One of the other things we could do for any search, right? This is general searches. It's not specific to one thing or another. That is not. And this one is extremely powerful. This is how we can exclude entire groups of results when we start dealing with this implicit and that exists in a lot of our search terms. For example, if I'm looking for something that has ASR 1000 in the title, right? It starts with ASR 1, except for the 1002. So it could be a 1003, a 1004, it could be a 1010. Doesn't matter. I don't want 1002. This is how I could do it. So I have a combination here of a wildcard, an exclusionary statement, and then just the word memory means as long as the word memory appears anywhere in the document, that is considered a match. And that's a reference to kind of our traditional Google searching type of mentality. I mentioned that this takes on a logical AND approach, and so you might be asking, well, what about OR? And yes, we do support OR as well. The gotcha for OR, it must be capitalized, both letters. And we're always going to compare whatever is on the left with whatever is on the right. This example here would translate to any item mentioning ASR 1002 or 1004 in the title and mentions memory anywhere in the result. So ASR 1002 and memory or ASR 1004 and memory. Anything matching one of those two will be returned. Okay, so that's general searches. Now we're going to speed things up a little bit and go through some rapid fire stuff, starting with our service requests. These are the 6 most popular, or what I consider to be the most popular key value statements. And we'll see it always follows this format in the top right here. It's always the field, colon, and then the value. If you want to include or exclude a given case status, you would just use something like status colon closed. And if you're a new hire engineer, just be aware if you take enough cases, you will eventually memorize what all the statuses are. I don't have them all listed here, but just be aware if you were to say status colon closed, that would give you only closed SRs. If you were to put a minus in front of it, the not operator from our previous slide, well, that will now show you anything that is not closed, that excludes all those results from your topic search. We can also use the linked defects option here. This is another one where if I want to see SRs that have either a specific bug attached or any bug attached, I could use one of these terms. Now, people often ask, well, if I knew what the bug ID was, why would I use topic to find it? Well, typically where I use something like this, I could say linked defects CSC star because all of the defects within Cisco, they always start with the letters CSC, regardless of their technology. So CSC star gives me all of our products bugs, and I can just see any case with a bug attached. But a lot of times I might come across a scenario where maybe all my topic searches are giving me a result for a bug I know is not the problem. And I'm tired of looking at all these SRs and they keep giving me a bug I know is not impacting my customer. So if I know what bug it's not, I can simply say minus linked defects colon CSC and then the bug ID. And that will now exclude that from all of my results. Tech and subtech are pretty straightforward. Again, as you join a TAC team, you'll eventually memorize all these relative to your technology, as will you memorize the problem and resolution codes. This could be useful if you're looking for SRs where maybe someone suspected a bug or they had something similar, something common that you're used to. I could tell topic, hey, only show me the SRs that were closed due to hardware failure or were not closed due to hardware failure. Or maybe it was a software defect or a licensing issue or a config assistance. All of these are searchable using these terms. Very important. And also keep in mind, and I have a couple examples here, if you want to include the full term in quotes, you can. Otherwise, if you have something like license space issues being the resolution code, you could just use one of those words and that will be considered a match according to topic. So let's put some of this into perspective, right? What does a real world topic search look like using some of these filters? I have an example here where I suspect I'm hitting a bug where the 9200, the Catalyst 9200, has some sort of Mac learning issue. And so I'm looking for other SRs to see who else figured out what the problem is. What other SRs, what were they doing, right? I want to research them, see what bugs they found, etc. How can I improve this result? Well, let's look. I just have the 9200 Mac Learning, just generic terms, nothing special. I get nearly 10,000 results in CS1, that's our service requests, plus another 2,500 defects. That's not very helpful. Even this one example, it looks like they say, oh, it could be related to a bug, but they never were able to find anything because the defect count is 0. So if I were to improve this, I'm going to start by looking at some of these fields. The technology and subtechnology, it looks like there's a keyword specific for Catalyst 9200 issues, and it's in the LAN switching technology. I can also set up the defect count to say, just show me the SRs that already have a bug attached. The end result is going to look something like this. Technology, and then LAN switching in quotes, subtech of CAT 9200, link defects of CSC star, and then I still include my generic terms of Mac learning. And now here I could see my results went from nearly 10,000 to about 1,300. So I cut out thousands of what would otherwise be irrelevant SRs. And now I'm looking at only the cases worked for the 9200 that already have a bug attached. These are likely to be a lot more relevant to my customer's issue than anything else we were seeing earlier. All right. Let's now focus on same thing, but for bugs. What are some of the most common terms? I have what I consider the 5 most common search terms here, starting with the severity. Now, if you're familiar with the old topic, we could just put in severity and then a number. The new version of topic, we do need to spell this out. And so I have all the translations here. A Sev1 bug would be severity catastrophic. A Sev6 enhancement would be severity enhancement. If you want to filter something out based on project and component, you could do that here. Keep in mind there are some components which are used across multiple projects. So there might be a DHCP component within EMBU, but also a different DHCP component within the CSC.sys. So it's recommended when you're looking for bugs, you include both of these. And again, you will also memorize this depending on what team you're going to. So and examples I have here, CSC.sys. This is typically where all of our iOS and iOS XE bugs exist. Any NXOS or data center bugs typically are worked in this space, wireless bugs in this one, and there's over a dozen different projects, so just pay attention and you'll very quickly have that one figured out. Statuses are also something we can filter. This is not all the statuses, it's just a sample of them, but we can chain any number of these with or statements because a bug can't be 2 statuses at the same time. So I might want to say something like status R or status V in order to get any bug that is resolved or verified, which is some form of being fixed. And then finally, the last one here is tickets count or found. All 3 of these examples are different ways we can look at customer-facing bugs as opposed to bugs that were maybe found internally or during our dev test that are unlikely to ever be a customer-facing issue. So found customer, this is short for customer use. And then tickets count, I have 2 options. I could say anything with 1 or more SRs attached, or anything that does not have 0 SRs attached. So these are all different methods to essentially get very similar results. If I were to see this in practice, we have something here, and this is a callback to earlier in the slide. I have a DHCP issue on a 5508 wireless controller. I'm pretty certain I'm hitting a bug, but I can't find one that really matches what my customer is seeing. And all I really know is that bugs for this product are filed under the csc.embu project. And if we look at some of the results I have here with just this simple term, I get nearly 3,500 results, and some of these really don't look very promising. For instance, this one was found during our lab testing, right? csc.lab trunk, found during functional testing. This one is a documentation issue in a development environment, again, functional testing. So the first two results don't look very promising. How can I get this a little bit more relevant? Well, knowing the project, I could do something like this. I could say not tickets count 0, so that's any bug with at least one SR attached that is worked in the csc.embu project and is in either a verified or resolved status, which also mentions 5508 and the word DHCP. And we can see we went from thousands of possible defects to just under 400, and now these results are looking a little bit more promising. We can see the very first one here. This was a severe issue in the WLC DHCP component. It's customer facing, and we could see that, yeah, this looks like it might be related to DHCP problems. Whereas the next one, a little bit closer, it is customer facing, but it looks like it's a documentation issue. So if I wanted to expand this even more, I can add a minus component, WLC-docs, to exclude similar results and get even more granular, right? So all of this is very easily doable, just filtering out large swaths of data that we don't think are relevant. This is how you accomplish that. Going back to our quick examples, I only have 3 spread across our TechZone and news groups. So I mentioned earlier TechZone, you have either the TechZone Knowledge Board, which is abbreviated as TKB, or you have the forum. The way you filter them out is with the style command. If I want to measure quality in one form or another, this is how you do it. And because these are numbers, it means that those range modifiers are great being used here. So I could do things like this first one would give me 2 or more cases linked. This would give me 2,500 or more views. This would give me 6 or more kudos. And I call that out just as a reminder. This is greater than, not greater than or equal to. So if you wanted anything with a case linked, this would be greater than 0. Otherwise, make sure you spell out greater than or equal to. Within our news groups, this is something that also you will eventually memorize as you become a bit more experienced on your teams. But just know that a lot of our news groups, when you're searching topic, will start with Cisco dot and then some letters here, followed by the news group name. And you could usually tell which one is related to technical or marketing through the CS or ASK or TME. So I have a little cheat sheet down here. So anything that says CS is short for customer support. These are specifically designed for TAC engineers to help ask technical questions and have a technical discussion. Whereas generally speaking, the ASK mailers, they usually have either TME or PM. That's our technical marketing engineers or our product managers. That's more about sort of features and capabilities rather than troubleshooting something that should be working and is not. So if you want to include or exclude a relevant result, this is how you do it. And if we were to put this into practice, rather than give you a sample right up front, we'll leave it open-ended. So how would you perform a search where you're looking for a well-written TechZone article that walks you through how to troubleshoot high CPU for your given technology? And knowing what we have available to us, there's actually no single correct answer for this. And I've got 3 examples here. We could say something like troubleshooting high CPU in quotes, look at style TechZone Knowledge Board, and just anything with at least 1 kudo. Or maybe I want something that has the word troubleshooting in the title specifically and has a certain number of views. Or if I want to get a bit more creative, I can chain together various OR statements to find variations of what I expect this document may be titled. So it could be troubleshooting CPU or troubleshooting high CPU. As long as that's mentioned somewhere, it will be returned and has to have things like CPU in the title or 1 or more cases linked. So these are just 3 examples of how we can sort of interchange the text zone specific as well as some of the general search terms that I taught you here today. We can add these into a single search string and hopefully get the results you need. But just know there's not always going to be kind of one golden string you could use. It might take a few iterations of it and some trial and error in order to figure out what's going on. All right, next up that we need to talk about is the literal search. And if you look at these 2 terms, rm-r, you may notice there's a slight difference. Now, this particular font in PowerPoint makes it hopefully a little bit more obvious, but the dash on the left here is a slightly larger size than the dash on the right. And that is because this is actually 2 separate key values. This is not a dash that is equal. And by default, Topic, when it sees certain characters like dashes or underscores, it does do some minimal substitution there. So if you see RM -R, it'll also match that with an RM space R. But if you have a term where you need a very explicit match, if the characters are important or the orders or the way they're written, if that is extremely important, that's where literal search comes in. And if I were to take these 2 terms and put them into Topic, we can see an example of how this works. Here, in a different font, this dash is pretty much indistinguishable, right? It's a little bit smaller and it's a lot harder to see than what we have up here. But when I do a literal search for this example on the left, I get exactly one result. If I do the advanced search, which is what's required for a lot of these key value pairs I've been teaching you, Topic does a little bit of that substitution and thinks, oh, well, I've actually got nearly 300 results that are very similar to this. Here they are. Some more examples about how our literal search might be useful. So if I were to do something like service-policy QoS_policy, an advanced search is going to give me over 500 results because sometimes things might have service space policy or QoS space policy in it. And the little space here, there might be a dash. So we could see, even though there's a space after the word policy here, it's substituted with an underscore, and this is a sample of something that might be returned. But if I do a literal search, I go from 500 results down to a little over 100. And now this will match this term with the dashes, underscores, and the space at the end. It matches it exactly. One possible use case for this is if you're dealing with code or scripts of some kind. And one of our data sources is some of our code bases like BDB or Gnosis, if you're familiar with those tools. And I have an example of a regular expression I was searching for, and this is a type of scripting language known as EEM. And so if I do an advanced search with this, I get over 1,300 results. Now, you might be asking yourself, what's up with this backslash? Well, that's because I'm looking for this quote exactly. And anytime you need a quote to be interpreted literally, not as a way to break up your tokens, you need to put this backslash in front of it in order to tell the search engine that, hey, I want this to be an actual quote, not just breaking up tokens. And if I look at some of the samples here, right, I'm looking at the word regexp, and then there should be a literal quote, some square brackets, 0 through 9 plus, and then a quote. And what gets matched is close, but not quite it. I have curly braces and open parentheses. This one has a single character quote as well as a caret. This one has an underscore and a parenthesis in front of it. So all these are close, but don't quite match. I end up getting over 1,300 of those results. However, if I do a literal search, I get just over 40 results. And here's a sample of what it looks like where someone has this term exactly. It's that word, regexp. It's got a space, open quote, square bracket, the plus, close quote. That matches this term with the escape character exactly. And so this is how we can get those very literal results if you're someone who's working with code or needs something that's important. All right, So we've been at this a while. You've been listening to me talk on about all these different terms. You're likely thinking right now, holy cow, how am I expected to remember all this? Well, I've got some good news. I've got a cheat sheet for you that contains not everything here, but what I consider to be some of the more common terms. And I've broken it up by our service requests, our bugs, tech zone, news groups, and stuff that applies everywhere. This is the general search techniques, and I've got some examples down below so you can look at it and hopefully modify it to use some of your own searches. In order to download this, go to this link here. This is my box folder. And within this should be a topic training subfolder. When you go to that, you'll see not only a copy of these slides in this recording, but you'll see this home print big topic cheat sheet version 2.pdf. That is what you want to download. One thing to keep in mind, some of these terms will include some of the terms that we're going to go over here very shortly in part 2. So just be aware if it doesn't look familiar now, we'll be getting to it very soon. All right, and with that, we've gotten through part 1. So go ahead, if you need, pause this video, take a quick break, use the restroom, get a glass of water, whatever you need to do. And when you're ready, hit play, and we will go over a bit more of our search methods and techniques in order to get those very relevant topic results. All right, so welcome back. Let's dive right into part 2. For this agenda, we're going to be going over 2 primary things. First, I'm going to cover a few more examples that I find they can be very useful in certain scenarios, but I don't use them as often compared to the ones I showed you earlier. So I want to make sure you're aware that they exist so you can integrate them into your workflow. But otherwise, just be aware these are also out there. Afterwards, I also want to take a few minutes. This last section will go pretty quick. It's about customizing the topic interface and how we can maybe customize our data sources, how we can maybe change the way topic gives us data. And also I want to cover how do we provide feedback to the topic team or potentially get help if you're trying to use some of these advanced searches and maybe not getting the results you need. With that being said, let's dive right into our additional techniques. And I want to give a scenario for general searching. So let's imagine you are a customer and you're tasked with opening a TAC case for questions about an upcoming software upgrade. How would you title that case? And thinking about it, we can come up with a couple different ways. I could title it, hey, I have some upgrade questions. Or I have questions about upgrades. Or you could say, I have a device that's going to be upgraded soon. I've got some questions, right? There's lots of different ways we can all type the word upgrade, right? We have upgrade, upgrades, upgrading, upgraded, right? Different tenses, etc. And we can also run into a scenario where maybe we tried to do the upgrade, but it didn't go well. And it took us over 24 hours to restore services, and we are super tired and need to open up a TAC case. And because we're very tired, we are making some mistakes. We say things like upgrade failed, or UO grade didn't go as planned, or we say the network upguard was not successful. And we open the case and see if TAC can figure it out. Well, if for some reason we wanted to search topic for something that has not only the variations of the word, but includes some of the typos as well, how can we do that? That is where fuzzy search comes in. And the way we use a fuzzy search is we need to specify our token, right? Whatever it is we're trying to find, and then a tilde or squiggle, and then some optional number. And if you don't put in a number, it's going to use the number 2 by default. And this defines how many kind of letters and how much variation can we introduce to this original token. And it's not quite, 1 for 1 in terms of letter and number substitution. There's a mathematical formula behind it, but just be aware, the larger that number, the more wacky results you're going to get. So try to keep it around 2 or 3. And I've got some examples here of what we can expect to see. So this search is basically saying, look up anything with the word upgrade in the title to a distance of around 3, but exclude anything where the word upgrade is spelled exactly like that. And we've got some examples here. I'll quickly circle them in terms of what we can expect to see. So here we have someone who made a typo, and then others are using various forms of tense. So here we could say it needs to be upgraded. This one upgrades, and then once again, another typo. So fuzzy search, right? It's not going to be the most common thing you use. I actually don't use it a whole lot because it does increase the number of results I get. But if you're running up against walls and you can't find what it is you're looking for, and you want to try kind of really searching into the depths, this might be something you could use. In addition to that, we also have parentheses, and this is good if you want to start chaining together various combinations of and or statements. And I have a very simple example here where I'm looking for anything that has 38 or 3650 in the title and has boot failure or fails to boot. You can have any number of these brought together, and so that will give you many different combinations of the word. The reason I don't use this very often is simply because it can get a little complex if you're dealing with a very large search string. And you also have to make sure you look out for the gotcha, which is you must have a white space between the parenthesis and your token. So you'll notice here I have an open parenthesis, space, and then title : 3850. And then at the end, there's an end quote, there's a space here, and then my close parenthesis. If you do not have the space, then it's going to treat these terms as individual tokens. So it's going to look for any document or any item that has parenthesis title : 3850 as a token, and it's not going to treat it as a key value. If you're dealing with ranges, you can also do things like square and curly brackets. And I have a couple examples of where this works. Things like date, tick account, kudos, etc. The thing to be aware of here is just whether or not you're using square or curly brackets, what that means. Square brackets are inclusive, meaning this will match the range of 0 through 5, including 0 and 5. The same thing in curly brackets, though, means it excludes 0 and it excludes 5. So it'll be a range of 1 through 4, excluding 0 and 5. If you mix and match, then it'll match whatever you have on either side. So here, this will give you 1 through 5, or this will give you 0 through 4 in this example. The gotcha is this, unlike the parenthesis, does not need a space. You actually cannot use the space. So if I say date : and then I have a square or curly bracket, you'll notice there's no space on either side. It must be right up against your characters. You also need to have the word to, T-O, fully capitalized. All letters need to be caps. Otherwise, it'll treat these as separate tokens. All right, so let's dive into our SRs and more of that rapid fire stance. So we talked about things like tech and subtech. Here we could start getting into some of the more specific enclosures within the case. Things like the problem description, the resolution summary, or the customer symptom. If you're looking for something that mentions a particular word, phrase, platform, whatever, you can search those enclosures specifically using these filters. Also, if you're looking for something with a certain number of defects, we could use defect count. Normally, I just care about service requests. I just want to know it has a bug attached. I don't care how many bugs, just a bug. But if for some reason you need something with a certain number, this is how you do it. Priority is also something that we can potentially filter on. The one gotcha here is if a case is opened up as a severity 1, but then closes as a sev 3, then it'll show up as priority 3. So it's always either whatever the state is now or whatever it was closed as, that will be the searchable priority. And then finally on the screen, hardware and software product type. This is, again, not super commonly used, but sometimes maybe you're looking for SRs that were opened or resolved on a particular version of code or related to certain hardware. So I've got some examples here. Again, the actual string you would use varies quite considerably depending on what technology you go to. So you'll pretty much figure out what's there as time goes on, or you just look at an SR that's similar and kind of copy it over. But be aware, if you need to search on those fields, you can. And the final kind of gotcha for all of this, and one of the reasons why I don't use them as often, is that a lot of this stuff is going to be outside of my control. Meaning, customer symptom, normally customers are not very descriptive when they open a case, or TAC engineers may not always put a good resolution summary, so that's why I'd rather have something that says either RMA or software bug. I want it to be mentioned anywhere in the document, not necessarily resolution, but I do get lucky every so often when I use these terms. So how can we use some of this in the real world? Well, I've got a true story that I think helps put some of it into perspective. And this actually happened to me a couple of weeks ago. I had an escalation manager reach out stating, we think there might be a brand new issue in the field where large numbers of Catalyst 9000 series switches are all going to start reloading all at once, or at least in very close succession. So possibly 50 devices all reload in the span of an hour. We don't know what the trigger is, but we want to know, have we seen any SRs opened up recently that might match this problem description? So I can't create a Borg module to look at this after the fact, so I need to use a topic search. So what would some of the searches look like? And I ran quite a few. These are some examples. I start off by saying, all right, well, let's look at any SR that is not closed. So that would be open. So any SR that is still open since January 1st of 2022 that was opened against a Catalyst 9000 series piece of hardware, right? So whether it's 92, 93, 94, doesn't matter. Just anything where the hardware product type was Catalyst 9000 and the customer mentioned in the SR in their initial symptom, they mentioned the words reload or crash. Because if I was a customer and I didn't know what was going on, I would open a Catalyst 9K case saying, hey, I just had a whole bunch of switches reload, or I just had a whole bunch of switches crash. What's going on? Another example that I used is just below. Same thing, any SR that is not closed, so anything that's still open, and is priority 1. Because if I just had 50 plus switches reload at once, you could bet I'm opening up a Sev1 ticket. I'm also looking for something where the problem description, and this could be written by the TAC engineer, mentions the phrase multiple and reload, because I'm looking for something where TAC says, hey, customer experienced multiple reloads or had multiple devices reload, some variation of that, ever since January 1st of 2022. So these sort of search phrases are some examples where we might be able to use some of these more advanced terms in order to get some of those more specific results. And I did several like this in order to see, and I'm happy to say we did not find any systemic issue. It looks like our one customer just had a false event. All right, so now let's go and kind of group together our bugs, TechZone, and news groups, because there's not a whole lot of kind of what I would consider super innovative techniques. First off, specific to bugs, is resolved on. And because this is a date, it follows the similar format of year, month, and day. And this is very useful because sometimes a bug might be opened and then may not be resolved for weeks, months, or years later. And ultimately, that's probably what I care about the most, is when was the bug resolved? Because if it was fixed, then anything after that date is unlikely to be affected by it. Integrated releases is also how we could filter based on where a fix might be. So if my customer is running 16.12.4, I might want to exclude all bugs that were fixed in that release specifically, and then combine something like resolved on in order to see what bugs out there are unresolved and might be impacting my customer. If you want to look at something in the release note or the description of the bug, those are searchable fields as well. So if you're looking for maybe a special code name, term, etc. that you might expect to see here, this is how you could do it. Now, the next group here, these are going to be for news groups and then TechZone. One problem I always have with newsgroup discussions is a lot of times, because it's a best effort mailer, someone will send an email and nobody responds to them. And even though the email matches my problem exactly, it's not very helpful. So I could use article count in order to filter the results that do not have any responses. So I could say anything that does not have just a single email, or anything with greater than one. So this will give me anything where at least someone either sent a follow-up email or generated a response. We can't filter out whether or not an email is a response. We can just count whether or not there's something there. So this is how we can do that. And then for TextZone, these last two are TextZone. If I'm using the forum board specifically, I can look for things that have a state of answered, or I could also do something similar to article count and look at something with replies. So if you're looking to see if someone has your same issue within TextZone and someone just posted a question and never got a response, you could use one of these to filter those out. So let's put it into practice. I believe my customer might be hitting an interface-related bug, so something with the link is going down, and I'm purposely keeping this sort of technology agnostic, but based on the show version, the code they are running was compiled in June of 2020, and I know specifically that the 16.12.4 release is impacted since that's what the customer is running. So I know when their code was created, what code they're on now. So I want to search all the bugs that may have been fixed on or after this compile date and don't include 16.12.4. Well, this is how we could do that. Okay, let me get my little meeting window out of the way. There we go. So this is what it would look like. Resolved on : greater than 6.1. So this is basically any date in June that does not mention 16.12.4 and has in the release note the word link or interface. Because if I'm writing a bug and I'm going to have a customer facing enclosure that talks about a link or an interface problem, I'm probably going to use one of those two words in the customer facing release note. One of the other things that we could use resolved on for, in addition to, or where this could be benefited from date, is for things like this. Keep in mind, if you use date as a whole, date is just when the bug is first filed. And so that would match this criteria here. This bug was filed in late August of 2012, and then it took over 8 years and 48 separate SRs to be attached to that bug before we finally resolved it. And depending on how I'm applying my filters, right, if I did a date of greater than 2019, this bug wouldn't show up, even though it's existed for quite some time. Now, fortunately, these sort of things are very rare, which is also why date's usually pretty reliable. But if for some reason you're looking for only resolved defects and you want those resolutions happening after a certain period, the resolved on field can be very beneficial to you. All right, second half here, home stretch, customizing the UI and our documentation. One of the things that I like to point out when dealing with Topic, a lot of people will just accept the default data sources up here. And if you hit the Show More button, you'll see there's a lot more sources we could use. If you don't recognize what these are, that's fine, because some of them might be either region or technology specific, but others might be applicable to the vast majority of the engineers out there. Things like BEMS, or internal pcerts, or even something like TACWiki if you're supporting an older product. Just remember, if you add a new group of sources, make sure you hit where this little arrow is blinking in order to save those results so all subsequent searches now include them. In addition to this, one of the other things you could do to kind of customize Topic to your liking is you click on your icon, and you can see the arrow blinking next to my face there. And when you click on My Preferences, you will get this pop-up. And two of the things that you can control that a lot of people like to use is stuff like quicker cadets or quicker CS1, as opposed to using kind of the defaults that exist there now. if you replace these strings with their quicker counterparts, you can have it where now any topic result you select will bring you straight to that tool and you don't need to copy it over. Or if you're using one of the quickers and you want to go back, then you could just use this term. In addition to all this, some engineers find that occasionally all the machine learning and artificial intelligence stuff, it's really not as helpful as they would hope and they want to disable it. This is how you do it. Otherwise, I encourage you to keep it going because every so often it does occasionally give you something relevant and it can save you a lot of time. Now, going back to the main topic screen, instead of picking your icon, if you click the little circle with the 3 dots and then click the user guide, you will get a Microsoft Word doc that contains everything I just talked about today and a whole lot more. I think at the time of this recording, it's over 70 pages, with page 41 being the start of all the key value pairs. And I just took a very small snippet of our bug fields, and we could see there's strings for identifier, found, last changed, etc. There's well over a dozen for defects, but then all of our other data sources also have their own terms. And I've got some of those data sources here. So there's additional stuff for bugs, service requests, tech zones, newsgroup, field notices, CX training, all this stuff and more exists in that documentation. So if you're on a team where maybe you are supporting one of these other technologies that we did not talk about today, I highly encourage you, go to this doc, take a look, start at page 41, look at what's available to you and see if you could use it to your benefit. All right, and then the last thing we need to talk about before you are free of me and this video is how do we get support? Well, for that, we're going to click those 3 dots back up at the bottom, or back up at the top one more time, and we have 2 options to do it. The first option here, where it simply says support right here, this will let you open a remedy ticket or whatever kind of flavor of ticketing system we have at the time that you are listening to this recording. And you can open up a case and pursue whatever it is you need. And typically this is done if maybe we have an acquisition and we need to integrate a new database, or maybe you're seeing a bug, crash, whatever. That's how you could do it. But if you want something that's a bit more real time, I would encourage you to join the topic search discussion. When you click this, you're going to get a window that's going to ask for your email address and ask for a couple quick questions. And once you go through those, if you look at your WebEx client, you will be added to a large group within that WebEx client. It's got lots of users as well as people like myself who are well-versed in topic. And if you have a question or something's not working, you can ask it there and hopefully get a much more kind of quicker real-time response and get you back where you need to be. And with that, that is all I have for you guys. So first off, if you found this information useful, I highly encourage feedback. So feel free to reach out to me, whether it be good, bad, ugly, I don't care. I just want to know, was this useful? And you know, that sort of thing goes a long way with me, just so I know I'm making good quality content that is useful to all of TAC. And also, if you are an experienced engineer, or even if you're a new hire and you eventually want to maybe integrate this into your team or just tell others about it, this training, the PowerPoint recording, everything is available at this box folder. I've got other trainings on there as well. Some of them are specific to my tech, but feel free to take a look and share it with others. So with that being said, that's all I have for you. I hope you have a great day. I hope you found this useful, and I'm looking forward to how quickly you can improve your topic search results in order to make our customer experience that much better. Thank you and have a great day.